What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the latest episode of the Layup Line. My name is Dolos, and today I've got a special guest here with me today. He goes by the name Dimitri, and he goes by Kings Draft on Twitter as well. He is a Kings fan, a Kings Draft specialist, and I've got him here today to talk through the new head coaching hire for the Sacramento Kings, Mike Brown. Dimitri, what's up? Intro yourself.
How you doing, man? My name is Kings Draft. I've been on Twitter for a few years. Basically, just do Kings Draft stuff and talk about the team, the direction it's been going, and sort of just my thoughts on how the seasons have been going. Obviously, most of the time it isn't too positive. I think I get a little bit of a rep for being more of a little bit of a doomer Kings fan as opposed to a lot of the traditional Kings media. But I do think that's a fair representation of the fans and the team when you consider the amount of success we've had in the last couple decades.
Yeah, I'm extremely excited to have you on the show because you don't get the perspective of Kings fans very much. When national media brings up Kings fan, or other NBA fans bring up the Kings, it's more to in that mockery tone of, hey, Kings gonna Kings. But I wanted to bring an actual fan, someone that's devoted to the team, to just talk objectively about the lows, the highs, and what's to come. So if you haven't heard, the Kings have hired Mike Brown as their head coach. I was shocked that they gave him 4 years. You do have any kind of response from that? The fact that he got 4 years, is that right?
Yeah, I like the stability it gives, to be honest. Just because the Kings have hired and fired a bunch of coaches, and I do know that at least his demands were that the contract was contingent on that we win, and if we don't win, he has a way out. I don't know if he actually got that, but that was in the reporting that I saw. So if that's in the contract, then Mike Brown has a lot of power over this team right now, and he honestly kind of has Vivek by the balls. But if if that isn't the case, then at least we've got him down for 4 years, and I just hope that we don't fire him in like 2, as we have most of our coaches. It'd be nice to bring some stability, and I do think when you look at the coaches we've had, Mike Brown is pretty solid. He's not the best hire we could have made, and I guess we'll go into all the candidates and who we could have hired later. But I mean, I do think he's better than a lot of the other options when you consider our finalists were Steve Clifford and Mark Jackson,
Yeah, I've got to say, just upfront, as a Lakers fan, I know myself and other Lakers fans were kind of hoping you guys hired Mark Jackson just to kind of take him off the table and guarantee that the Lakers couldn't. But I'm glad with the hire you guys went with. Just to run through Mike Brown's resume real quick. He's been an assistant coach for a long time. 97 and 99, he was an assistant for the Wizards from 2000 to 2003. That was the San Antonio Spurs. So he wasn't necessarily with any of the Spurs title teams, but those were still pretty good Spurs teams that he was an assistant with. From 03 to 05, he's an assistant with the Pacers. And from 2005 to 2010, head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. All time, his record during that stretch: 222 wins, 106 losses. 2008 Coach of the Year, 2007 Eastern Conference champions. Pretty successful stint in Cleveland. From 11 to 13, he's the head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers. He coaches a 42 and 29 record there. And then he returns for a short stint in Cleveland in 13-14, 33 and 49 record. And since then, he's been an assistant coach with Golden State. So, 2 titles during that run with the KD years. And so he was there 2016 to 2022. So a lot of finals experience, a lot of playoff experience. And we've seen him step in and coach for Steve Kerr while he's been out. So I feel like he's a guy who's got to grow a lot. Who's got to be a lot of around just really, really talented players. During those assistant stretches, he's a coach with the Spurs and around Tim Duncan and around Popovich. Then with the Cavs, a young LeBron James is there making those finals trips. He even, spends a little stint in LA and he's there with Kobe. And
yeah, I mean, he knows stars.
Yeah. I mean, Golden State. Yeah. That last stint in Cleveland, he spent some time with Kyrie and then finished up in Golden State. Steph, Clay, Draymond, KD. So, he's been around stars. So from a personality standpoint, I think he's someone who can, definitely demand respect in a locker room. And from like reporting, like you just constantly hear people just go off about his X's and O's, how smart of a basketball mind he is. So I am extremely interested in this hire. But I'll just let you kind of take the stage and just go off on what you think about the hiring process, the final result, and just everything in general from there.
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't my first choice going into it, but I know. Listen, I'm gonna give the keys to Monty McNair here and let him play out his vision and see how it goes out, because at least it's not Vivek making the pick, right?
Yeah.
As for like who my first choice would have been, it's actually who you guys are looking at right now, Adrian Griffin. I'm a huge Adrian Griffin fan. If we just get into him really quick, I mean, if you're looking at a guy that would have maximized Fox, this is a guy that won MVP with D Rose as an assistant coach, but also MVP with Russell Westbrook as an assistant coach. It's also a guy that Jeremy Grant and Joakim Noah and guys like that have always attributed to being like huge for their development. If you go and look up quotes, you'll find about them. And he's a guy that's been fantastic, and pretty much every team he's gone to has gotten better as an assistant. He's had some USA basketball experience as an assistant. He's also been, I believe, he won a ring with the Raptors, and he was an actual like player. So I mean, Adrian Griffin by far would have been my first choice. Although if the Lakers sign him, that would kind of signal to me that they're looking to get Russ right more than anything, to be honest with you. But yeah, that would have been my first choice for Kings head coach, because I mean he's worked with Tibbs and Nurse too. Like he would have been such a great defensive coach to bring in. But I understand them wanting that experience, right? Going back to Mike Brown or Steve Clifford or Mark Jackson. These are all guys that actually have a win-loss record in the NBA. So if you're going for that kind of perspective, I get it. But yeah, I mean, out of those three, Mike Brown was definitely the best one. One of the reasons he was actually fired from the Lakers is because he wanted to run the Princeton offense, which is something that we actually ran when we were in our most successful days with like kind of the Bagley buddy, De'Aaron when De'Aaron was playing really well, and we had Bogey, and that's kind of what we were running with Jaeger a bit. So that might help a bit here too. I definitely see why Monty did it. Like Monty knows ball. He definitely like knows what he's doing. He hosted, if you go back and look, you can find them talking at MIT at a university about like maximizing your star players. Him and Mike Brown, they actually have like this conference where they talk about it, like how to maximize your stars and the different stars they've played with. And I mean, some of it was really interesting to hear, because some of it actually got me a little worried for Mike Brown. At one point he said something like he was suggesting his players how to play defensively, and then pretty much like LeBron just completely overrode what he wanted to do and was like, fuck that, we're doing this. Which I was like, okay, he might be a bit of a LeBron merchant. We'll see. Like, I'm a bit scared about that, but also there's some comfort in knowing, like, I've read reports that Mike Brown has like 200-page like defensive playbooks and shit. So yeah, we'll see, man. It's definitely the best coach we've had since Jaeger, but it's also not a high bar. You know what I mean? So
fair. Yeah, I mean, one thing in just kind of like your analyzation of everything, I noticed you really focused in on the defense, and obviously makes sense. That's been a weak point for the Sacramento Kings pretty much through this like De'Aaron Fox era. That's always been, hey, can they become a better defense? Can they start to compete better on defense? And their actual defensive scheme has been a huge part of that. So for those who might not be as familiar with the Kings, from your perspective, what would you say has kind of been like the defensive scheme that they've run with so far through the past couple of years, and where would you like to see it go?
I mean, it's been honestly just switch everything. And if you look at like just we were doing switch everything, and we don't have any guys that can actually move their feet, and we don't actually have any guys that can check the rim at all, which is hilarious. So like none of our guys have any vertical lift, and none of our guys can actually move their feet up until this year, where our POA defense did get a little bit better, and we weren't as bad of a defensive team this year than we were the year before, if I'm not mistaken. Because like 2 years ago, the Kings were like one of the worst defensive teams of all time for a certain stint. I remember it was like really bad. And this past year, we weren't as bad. We were still pretty bad, but I think Davion did help with that a lot. And if Fox is engaged, like I think he can actually slide his feet really well. But the thing is like, bro, look at every fucking guard, every wing, or every like our bigs, our forwards, none of them get blocks. Like, go look at Harrison Barnes and the amount he disrupts shots at the rim, or his flat block count. I know flat block count isn't the best, but like, look at the amount of shots like Domantas Sabonis is really disrupting at the rim. Like, it's not good at all. We have absolutely, if I had to zone in on one thing on defense that we're absolutely awful at, we need to improve on, it's our shot blocking right now, because it's disastrous for a team like us. We run switch everything, and we try to, like, it's been better when we throw Davion at guys, but like, we'll just throw Barnes at guys at the point of attack, or we'll throw him at like the 3-point line, and we'll be like, yo, keep up with this guy, and he'll just completely get blown by every time. His ankles will get broken, and it's just, yeah, it's I'm hoping that Mike Brown can do something about it, because it's been really bad.
Yeah, I mean, and also, like you mentioned, I think personnel also extremely important to this conversation. The Kings don't exactly have great defensive personnel. That changed a little bit. Davion Mitchell, really exciting, really great defensive player, especially as a rookie. So I think that's something that can lift the defensive floor for the team. I also think De'Aaron Fox can give more effort towards that end. I totally agree. He can be a better point of attack defender than what we've seen from him consistently through.
Yeah, because like, early career Fox was actually like a very solid defender. He kind of had a rep as a guy that had fast hands, was able to keep up with guys. And then I think just as the season, I don't know if he got like more cynical or something. Like, I don't know. It's just he's also had to put a lot into just keeping the team afloat offensively. But I think he's just dog tired. And like, when we just get into these losing streaks, it's just really hard to stay motivated defensively. Sometimes you just see like the will to want to play. And this happens for a lot of SAC players, not just Fox, man. You see the will and the love for the game disappear out of these men's eyes. And it sucks to see. It sucks to see. Right?
Yeah, fair. I agree. Like, I'm not one that really does the whole, rush a star out of a small market thing. But for Fox, I felt tangibly like, the joy in his game has declined, like, since he was a rookie. And so, like, I really am hoping this new front office, this new coaching staff can kind of reignite that. Speaking of big, like, changes on this team, I kind of want to get to the elephant in the room, the big trade that happened this past season, the Tyrese Haliburton for Sabonis trade. When it happened, the general response from NBA media, NBA fans was, the mockery. King's gonna king. They gave up this young budding all-star for Sabonis, who, generally is a guy who's not rated super highly. Although he is a two-time all-star, I think, most people agree he's on the lower end of that spectrum when it comes to all-stars. So the fact that I think Tyrese Haliburton is a guy who just generally has a viewed as like having a higher ceiling than Sabonis. So that trade was looked at as an L. What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, my thoughts on it is that it clearly signals that Monte McNair is under a lot like pressure to win now by Vivek, and he wants to win now. Factually, Sabonis will be better. Like, when we traded for him last season, like last half of the season, probably a better player. And this season, I'd say he's probably a better player. But going forward, the season after, probably not a better player, like, going forward. So, I mean, if you wanted to win and really push next season, I guess Sabonis is a marginally better player. Like, and the fit, I will say, the fit is considerably better. Like, he has turned De'Aaron Fox on. If you've seen De'Aaron Fox's stats since the Sabonis trade and you watch them on the court, like, you understand why they made the trade. Fox is weaving around in the mid-range, and you have Sabonis setting these small screens, like, and he'll just get guys and he'll catch guys multiple times, and it'll open up this space for Fox in the mid-range that, like, I haven't actually looked into his mid-range percentages before the DeMontis trade to after the DeMontis trade, but that would be something super interesting to look into, because I'm like certain that those are better. I know as a 3-point shooter, if you look at it, like his raw 3-point stats, they were better, but I guarantee you his mid-range shooting took a huge spike too. Because the way they work together, like, it does make sense. They play off each other really, really well. Fox can start sprinting down in transition, and you've got a big like Sabonis who can just get it under the rim and just whip it to him. And Fox is faster than everybody else. So he's like beating up. It has, like, you do see these glimpses of like, okay, like, I see what Monty's trying to build here. But you like, when you have these guys, and Sabonis is already like very like mid, and that's being generous as a defender. And then you have Fox, who's like just kind of disengaged defensively. That's the big worry for me. Like, offensively, you see the pop, you see how it works, and you see how it's going to be good next year. But like, how are you going to balance that out with the defensive end of the floor with the personnel that you currently have? That's where the roster still needs work to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like, I'm on that same kind of page in regards to this trade. And while I don't necessarily love it, Haliburton isn't the guard that I would have moved on from in that log jam. I understand. Like, I think there genuinely is a good fit between Sabonis and Fox. Just the way there's like now a post playmaker on the team who can, occasionally command a double team and really help Fox out as far as opening up his scoring game. So I agree with like adding Sabonis is a win now move. But I probably would have, looked to move Davion Mitchell way before I moved, Haliburton or Fox.
No, I agree.
I think those guys
Davion was definitely the one to move. Yeah. But I mean, Davion is definitely the one to move, but he also had a lot less value, which is I think why Monty did it. Sure. But I mean, I would have kept Haliburton. I'm a guy who had Haliburton number 1 on his board. Like, I was a big fan. I really loved his just. And the thing for me is that I love Ant, I love LaMelo too, but like I don't know. To me, Haliburton was always like a winning player, a guy who actually like wasn't necessarily the best player on his team, if this makes any sense, but a guy who like actually just does the winning plays that you need to do to make multiple deep championship runs. Like, he was a guy that at the end of his draft class might just have the most overall team success, but not the most individual accolades.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about Haliburton. I recently, maybe not recently, towards like the end of the season, I did a video on how he's been fitting in Indiana and some of his growth as a passer. So I think they've got a really good player in him, but that doesn't mean the Kings still don't have like a good direction in what they're doing. Any one individual trade, I don't think necessarily makes or breaks what you're doing. But it's just kind of how do you continue to build around it? What are the other moves? Like, it's one thing to make that swap for Sabonis and Haliburton, because, Sabonis does add something. He is a better offensive fit next to Fox, but it's like, how do you supplement the defense in other ways? How do you, still kind of increase the offensive fit? So they can still make that work. And the good thing about that,
though, you say supplement, right? I just want to touch on that. You say supplement to that fit. The good thing about it is that we can supplement that. Like, we didn't give any picks. That's the great thing about this trade, is that like if we had given picks, it would have been a total disaster. I could have written this off. I would totally flame this trade. But like, at least if we have picks, Monty can exercise the build he wants around Sabonis and Fox. Maybe I've heard we're actually like we are very interested in John Collins. I don't know how much that'll necessarily help. I do feel like John Collins might be a little untapped as a rim protector because he is next to Capella, but not by much, not by like that much, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's the fit. I understand like offensively, he's a guy that can, be a huge threat to the rim and be a 3-point shooter. So he's a pop threat and he's a real threat for both Sabonis and Fox. And like, if you do think he has some untapped potential as a rim protector, maybe. But that's I don't know if I'd invest big assets, like big future assets into getting John Collins on this team. I don't know if he's that big difference maker,
Yeah, who you decide to pick as the 4 for this team is going to be extremely interesting because, Indiana learned that as good as Miles Turner was, is like a stretch 4 option. It's also like a rim protector who was legitimately good at that. That front court with him and Sabonis, like the most they could max out really was sometimes just being sort of a positive, like a slight positive on the court at the same time together. So finding the right fit for Sabonis in that front court is going to be a huge part of, this rebuild for Monty McNair. Speaking of, I kind of want to just get into your thoughts and opinion on the roster and as far as like rapid fire, who can stay, who can go, who's a key pivotal piece of what this Sacramento team will be moving forward, and who's probably just more of a trade chip.
Sure.
First guy I want to start with, and probably I'm most curious about. I've seen a few mixed opinions from like the few Kings fans that I have on the timeline as far as Richaun Holmes. Some people love him. Some people think it's time to move on from him. He has a nice size contract. He's more of a trade asset than a future piece of the roster. What say you?
I'll say that I'm really glad he got his name cleared yesterday or the day before. That case still is ongoing for him, but I don't know if you saw with all that. He ended up getting the custody of his kid back, which is nice to hear. So that's good for him at least. I know there were some things written about him before but he seems to have gone through the legal process. And you hate to see. I'll wait till everything clears out officially, but as far as like what's been written right now, I guess you hate to see somebody get their name slandered like that and lose their kid, and then I mean, I could link you the article after this, but it was all over Sacramento news like last night. I don't know if it was something that you saw.
Yeah, I definitely missed out on that. I'm about to look it up right now.
Yeah, he basically his like the I guess his baby mom or whatever, his wife. I don't know if they were married or whatever, but I guess she took the kid without telling him out of state. So yeah, but it's kind of a messed up situation overall, and I think it is going to kind of drag his value down a bit, if we're talking on a basketball sense.
Okay.
And
yeah, I see the article you're referencing. Yeah, he was granted full custody after a full legal battle. There were some domestic violence accusations. So definitely one of those things got to wait for the full story on. But you know,
I mean, if Rashawn did clear his name, good for him. But I don't want to say anything too early, basically.
Yeah, totally.
But that being said, as far as the actual on-court stuff, Rashawn Holmes has been absent for a lot of this season, and he has been like not as good as he was before he got the contract. But I will say that I think a lot of that is just due to injury and due to also just struggling with what he's been dealing with this season, like what you just read about. So like with Rashawn, you have to realize he also he got an eye surgery. I don't know if a lot of people know this. He got hit in the eye this season. And he had to actually get surgery for it, and he was wearing an eye patch for a lot of the time. And that can actually, like, when you're a player that he's like the best. I don't know if you've seen his floater numbers, but they're like incredible. He has like one of the best floaters in the game. Mm-hmm. One thing that has me majorly worried about Holmes, and this is something you're not going to hear from somebody that doesn't watch the Kings regularly, is after the eye surgery, and like how, like I said, they can affect depth perception and stuff like that. The floater wasn't as good. I'm going to be honest with you. The floater was not as good, and that scares me a little bit. You have a major eye damage. You need surgery on your eyes. You're wearing an eye patch for like 2 months, and then you come back, and like you're a player that relies on that depth perception for your floater, and it's like it just doesn't look right. It is a little bit worrisome. I won't lie, especially with the contract we gave him. So I would lean on not giving up on Rashawn Holmes this season, because I do think his value is at a low because of that and because of extra stuff off the court. I would lean on kind of rehabilitating his value throughout the season. I do think he can be an amazing backup. I mean, I don't know if I trust our backup centers behind Sabonis necessarily. Like we have Damian Jones, who's been okay, honestly, and we have like Neemias Queta, who would be like basically thrown into the fire as like that's his first real year in the NBA, right? And while those guys like I like them as like, I guess Damian Jones isn't really a prospect, but I like the prospect of him playing. Like, I don't think they'd be as solid as Holmes off the bench. And if we're trying to be competitive, I think you gotta stick with Holmes. I mean, Holmes has been switchable. He's a good player, man. He's a really good player. He's switchable, one of the best floater shooters in the NBA. And he's a huge threat above the rim. He plays like really hard, and he is to some extent the soul of this team. He's the guy that's going to yell and beat his chest and fight on defense and be that soul in that fight that like I see missing, especially in Fox's eyes a lot of the time.
Absolutely. I'm pivoting to another guy that I'm also like really curious about his future with the team. I think this one's a bit more like leans obviously towards look for a trade for him. But Harrison Barnes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It seems like you kind of feel the same as far as like it's time to move.
Bro, it's been like 2.5 years that I feel like Harrison Barnes shouldn't be a King. Like Harrison Barnes might be the worst system fit I could think of, like as far as the Kings the past few years, bro. Like I remember what I said about no rim protection and the fact that Harrison Barnes can't move his feet in switches in a system that's full switching, and he offers 0 rim protection if we play him as like a drop big. So like, and which we have, by the way, we've tried playing Harrison Barnes as a big because his mobility is so bad. This guy, like, he will dunk sometimes, but as like an above the rim threat offensively, you can't really rely on it. And then like when it comes to him defensively above the rim, it's just not there. And it's just like he's basically good as like a help guy off the ball sometimes, like, and he'll make smart decisions that way. He'll get into a passing lane and he'll pick a ball that way. But like he's not a guy with super fast like fast hands or feet or like athletic ability. And other than the 3-point shooting and the fact that he can like, he really plays an old man game. Like he'll back you down in the post and he'll like wait for the guy to like swipe on him and he'll immediately get that reach through and he'll go for two free throws, right? So that's very many of his points are like just generated. He's actually like really underrated free throw shooter as far as just being able to get to his spot in the post and then draw a foul every single time. And like as far as that and the 3-point shooting, like that's good, but like it's not what we need in Sac. Like that's kind of like, other than the 3-point shooting, he's a very slow player offensively. You know what I mean? We're a team that likes to play fast, and he brings none of the qualities we need defensively. His value has been higher than honestly his like play for the last, I would say 2, maybe 3 years, honestly, since we've acquired him. And yeah, I'm befuddled, just fucking flabbergasted as to why we won't trade this guy, to be honest. Like the Celtics were giving us a huge package 2 years ago. We were getting good offers supposedly at this deadline, but it's just not a guy that we're looking to move on from, which is a mystery to me. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we kept him through this offseason, even though it's a terrible choice.
Yeah, like Harrison has this like combination of like just age where he's declining athletically, and then also the fact like he's not a great fit for the roster. So you're really getting like these diminishing returns in his minutes. And
his value is very good across the league. That's the fucking mystery to me,
bro. Like because he can still be a spot up shooter elsewhere. Like you said, he's serviceable as a help defender. Like if he can just camp down the weak side and you have more competent perimeter defenders at the point of attack. And Harrison Barnes is just the guy that you have to worry about. He'll make a dig, he'll make rotations and stuff like that. Like that's a fine role for him, and he's just being asked to do way too much.
He'll rotate, he'll make a dig, like you said. But he's not a guy that's gonna, he needs a guy that's gonna be like actively the rim protector for him in the drop, and he needs a guy that's going to be able to keep up at the point of attack, like you said, because there's no way he's right now he's so overextended in what he needs to do because our defense is terrible.
Yeah, I have another former King that I want to bring up and get your opinion on. This is a player I had trade ideas for him from the start of the year, Marvin Bagley. And I wanted to do like a Marvin Bagley for Darius Bazley swap, because I think Darius Bazley would have been like a long athletic wing that could have been added, and I think he fit fairly well next to a guy like
Sabonis. That would have been bad.
Yeah, just because like maybe a baby Jeremy Grant, you can develop him into a spot up shooter who plays defense on the wing. So I thought that would have been a great return for Marvin Bagley, and his time with the Kings was controversial. Just from the decision to draft him to how things ended. So just what's your thoughts on the Marvin Bagley tenure with the Kings?
I guess I'll say that I was always a pro Keith Bagley guy. I always thought that Bagley should have been more involved in the offense, and we should have given him more of an opportunity, because a lot of the time we were just stuffing him in the corner as like spot up 3-point shooter, which is really, really frustrating to see. And I understand, like, listen, as his dad, like I would be pissed off. Yeah. So I kind of understand that. Like, you want your son to succeed, and it feels like the whole city was shitting on him for a lot of the time. Like, there's actually this common joke in my group chat where we call certain fans, I'll just say certain fans, the Sacramagas, because they have this certain vibe about them. We'll just say that they judge players a certain way, and yeah, it's just, I don't know. Sometimes the fan base can be really, really rough to this team, I'll be honest. Like, and it's infuriating. It's like, I don't know, they'll get mad at off-court stuff that they really shouldn't be getting mad at, and they'll be way too hard on the guy, and like, he showed defensive improvement this year, man. Like, what regardless of what anyone will say, the guy actually like had some really strong defensive stretches this year, and it doesn't matter, because as far as like the whole, I guess, NBA meme sort of like online community is concerned, like, your first impression is like what you make, right? Like, if you're a terrible defender coming into the league, which Marvin was not that good of a defender coming into the league at all, like, you're gonna get this horrible rep. So like, I'm pretty sure statistically there were some stats to Marvin being like a very good defender this year. So yeah, I don't know. I think he's somebody that we treated really poorly. We could have involved more in our offense, and we failed as a prospect, truly.
Yeah, another reason I'm glad Luke Walton's gone.
Yeah, honestly, Luke Walton was infuriating. I mean, the man like literally just wasn't playing him in the beginning of the season. Clearly, just hated him at that point. It's not even a talent thing. If you're playing Nemanja Bjelica over the man, like it's really just at that point it was sickening. It was like, okay, like I understand we're done here, but like this shouldn't have ever been this way. Like this never ever shouldn't have been this way. Marvin actually has a lot of raw talent, and we don't have talent. We're not a talented team, so there's no excuse for him not being on the floor. Like,
and thinking back over that era, there was just so much like negativity and toxicity that came with like being the pick that the Kings went with and didn't select Luka, and all of like the narrative and story reasons that we got in the reports of why who was the GM at the time. Why the GM at the time chose not to draft Luka?
Vlade.
Yeah, Vlade supposedly having beef with Luka's dad or things like that. So
yeah, I think the Luka's dad
piled on. Yeah, that piled on to like Bagley's shoulders of like, oh, you're not Luka, and the Kings could have had Luka, and that always makes it worse for a draft prospect, and that's not Marvin's fault. So I think it just created a really unfair perception amongst fans as well.
Yeah, I think the sky was kind of like we wanted him to be like, well, at least the fans that didn't understand, right? Just because of draft placement, wanted him to be better than Luka, and that was never going to happen. I mean, I think you had to set your expectations for Marvin. That Marvin was going to be like a really good player. Marvin is a guy that can be a 20 and 10 guy with like actually decent defense, but you have to realize he's not going to be better than Luka because there's only a player like that comes around like Luka every 25 years, really. Like, I mean, it's just look, it sucks that you didn't pick the better player, but you should have at least treated the player you got well. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the time you've taken, and I don't want to take up too much more, but I do have one final question to wrap up on. I just want to just get your general sense of the future for the Sacramento Kings. If you have a prediction on when this playoff drought will end, just thoughts on how this De'Aaron Fox Sabonis core is going to come together. Any predictions on win-loss record or seeding for next season? Anything like that?
Shit. I think we could make the plan next season if we really, really push. Like we could be a bottom playoff team if we make some good additions, but we're gonna have to have a good off season, and I just don't know if I can trust that from the Kings, bro. Like, you asked me to say when the drought is going to end, and I honestly don't even know. I couldn't tell you. I go into every season hoping the drought will end. That's kind of how I feel. We have our pick this year, so I guess that's something we didn't really touch on. Is one of the biggest additions for this year will be what we do at the draft. And I think regardless of if we're at 7 or we jump up into the top 4. Getting one of those top 4 talents like Paolo, like Chet, like Jabari, which I think would be the best pure fit on the team, or like Ivy would be pretty good. But even if we stick at 7 and get a guy like Keegan Murray, it wouldn't be too bad. Yep. So I think the idea is probably like Fox, Davion, either Keegan Murray or Jabari if we jump up, and then like we make a trade for a guy like JC, like Collins, or someone else, like some other 4, and then you keep Sabonis. You have your bench, which could have been like Dante or Davion, whichever you didn't start. And then you still have like guys like Terrence Davis, which I think Terrence Davis, despite him being a piece of shit because of his, cases and the things he's done, he is not a bad basketball player, and he does serve as like a legit release valve for this team. Like there is sometimes a feel of like, especially when TD isn't on the court, like there's this feel of like guys are afraid to shoot a little bit. Guys are a little bit reluctant. And I'm not exactly sure why. It's they always kind of end up deflecting to either Fox or when we had him Haliburton, but Haliburton would deflect a lot too in the later shot clocks. But those were kind of the guys we were relying on in super late shot clock situations, and it felt like everyone else, all the other role players, were a little bit afraid to shoot. But when TD's on the floor, it feels like there's like a release valve, and it feels like everyone has a little bit more confidence because TD's just fucking chucking. I'm not necessarily saying it's a good thing. But it does help. It does kind of help, like, just it does help, like, because the flow of the offense does feel a little bit better, just because we're not passing up like shots that we shouldn't pass up. So as far as we have those guys, and we have Nexu, which has been decent, and we have like we still have Holmes on the bench. Technically, we keep him around, or Damian Jones or Keita. Like we have some guys, we have some depth. We could do some things, but I mean, I'm never going to guarantee the Kings are going to make a stop the streak, you know, because
yeah. That's a fair point. I just was really excited to do this episode because I think for the first time in a while, the Kings really do have a blueprint towards, some success where they, could realistically break this playoff drought in the next 3 to 5 years. So
they need forwards though. They need forwards. Like they have Dante Davey on Fox. They have Sabonis. They have Holmes. They need forwards.
A lot of guards.
Whole lot of guards. They have some serviceable bigs. It's about the fact that we don't have any forwards that can protect the rim. And I will say that every time, like you look at guys like even like, I don't know, OG might not be the best pure shot blocker, but at least he can get up there sometimes and he can like disrupt shots. Like he's disrupting way more shots at the rim compared to Harrison. And even a guy like Siakam, or like, obviously not to mention, like there's a ton of Raptors that would help, but like just a long guy, like, I mean, 6'9", like, can play defense. That's what we need, bro.
Yeah, the difficult thing will be that pretty much every team is looking for those, kind of players right now at that size. But, I'm really hoping the Kings can find them and put together some consistency because their fans definitely deserve it. Sticking with the team through a playoff drought this long, that's dedication.
It's tough,
so I gotta get that paid off at some point.
For sure.
Yeah. But, want to wrap up. I just want to thank you for coming on the show.
No problem,
I needed the Kings expert to speak to. I don't want to get up here and start, speaking out my neck about things that, I don't watch half the Kings games that you do. So, I'm glad I could.
I can't blame you, bro. I can't blame you. Have much better things to watch in LA. I am hoping you guys do give Adrian Griffin a real shot, though. He's like I said, don't sleep on him. Like I've been talking to the people that I, Lakers people that I talk to. Every Lakers fan I speak to, I say, don't sleep on Adrian Griffin. This guy is he's actually really solid. He's got a really good resume if you look through it. He's played with some great minds. He's got all the qualifications you'd want to see. The only thing is that, I mean, as a Lakers fan, I probably wouldn't want to keep Russ, and that's kind of the direction it would signal. But as far as a coach, I mean, I wouldn't put that on him necessarily. That's just the Lakers front office wanting to keep Russ, right?
Yeah, and we're gonna see on that front what ends up happening. But thank you again for your appearance on the show.
No problem.
Want to wrap it up.
Thanks for
having me.
Have
anything you got coming out that you want to promo?
I appreciate it, man. Well, I always have, my Kings Draft Twitter, which, go follow that. I'm always dropping new stuff there. As far as, I'll be once the what's it called? Oh my God, I'm at a loss for words right now.
Draft lottery.
Draft lottery happens. There you go. The draft lottery in a few days. Once that happens, I'll start dropping some mock drafts, and I will leading up to the draft, and I will also probably a few days or weeks before the draft, I will drop my big board. Be about 65 players. So that's coming. So if you want that, got that. Follow me on Twitter. I got my podcast sometimes that I'm on called Courtsiders. So give that a follow if you want. But yeah, that's basically everything I got. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
Okay. Appreciate that. And thank you to the listeners, viewers on YouTube. This has been The Layup Line. My name is Dolos. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And do me a favor, make sure you go support King's Draft. Go follow him on Twitter, support his podcast and all the content that he's putting out as well. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.